Imagine a glowing green line on a tiny circular screen, pulsing like a digital heartbeat. It looks like a medical device or a missile tracker, but the year is 1958. You are standing inside a high-security nuclear research facility, and you are holding a metal box with a single button to play tennis. This is not the neon-soaked arcade of the 80s or the high-fidelity render farms of today. This is the unexpected genesis of an industry that now eclipses Hollywood, birthed not by artists, but by scientists repurposing the machinery of war for a moment of levity. We often assume the lineage of digital entertainment begins with a yellow puck eating ghosts or a plumber smashing bricks. However, the true ancestry of the medium is far colder and much more industrial. It emerges from the vacuum tubes of World War II radar systems and the rigid architecture of Cold War defense spending. Before there were consoles, there were oscilloscopes. Today, we investigate how a bored nuclear physicist and a defense contractor fundamentally altered the human relationship with the television screen, transforming it from a passive window into an active participant. Deep within the Brookhaven National Laboratory, William Higginbotham faced a peculiar problem. The institution's annual visitor days were notoriously dry, filled with static displays of photographs and intimidating equations that alienated the general public. Higginbotham sought to bridge this gap with interactivity. Utilizing a Donner Model 30 analog computer, he manipulated the voltage of an oscilloscope to simulate wind resistance and gravity. The result was Tennis for Two, a crude yet mesmerizing simulation where a dot of light traced a parabolic arc across a cathode ray tube. The experiment was a sensation, drawing queues of visitors eager to twist the aluminum knobs and volley the photon ball. Yet Higginbotham viewed the invention as a trivial novelty, a mere parlor trick to amuse the masses before they returned to the serious business of nuclear proliferation. He never patented the device, and within 2 years, the apparatus was dismantled for parts. The concept of interactive video lay dormant, a ghost in the machine, waiting for a visionary who could see beyond the laboratory walls. That visionary arrived nearly a decade later in the form of Ralph Baer, a division manager at Sanders Associates, a massive defense contractor specializing in electronic warfare. While waiting for a colleague at a bus terminal in New York City, Baer scribbled a 4-page manifesto that would change the world. He envisioned a device that could attach to any standard television set, allowing the user to manipulate symbols on the screen. It was a radical departure from the passive consumption of broadcast waves, proposing instead that the viewer could seize control of the signal. Working in secrecy within the confines of a military-industrial firm, Baer and his team engineered the Brown Box. This wood-grained prototype was the physical manifestation of the shift from radar tracking to domestic recreation. It was clunky and primitive, yet it held the genetic code for every PlayStation and Xbox that would follow. When it eventually reached the market as the Magnavox Odyssey, it marked the first time the formidable technology of the Cold War had successfully infiltrated the suburban living room, disguised as a family toy. While Ralph Baer toiled in the sanitized quiet of defense contracting, a different energy was brewing in the chaotic domain of carnival midways and university computer labs. Nolan Bushnell, an engineering student with a penchant for amusement parks, understood that for this technology to thrive, it had to escape the sterile living room and enter the rowdy atmosphere of the local bar. His first attempt, Computer Space, was a commercial failure, confusing patrons with its complex instructions and alien controls. But Bushnell possessed a relentless, almost predatory instinct for engagement, leading him to found Atari and task a young engineer named Alan Alcorn with a simple training exercise. That exercise became Pong, and its debut at Andy Capp's Tavern in Sunnyvale, California, is now the stuff of Silicon Valley folklore. Within days of installation, the machine began to malfunction, not from a circuit failure, but because the coin mechanism was physically jammed with quarters.
The sheer volume of currency crushed the internal switch, a tangible signal that the public was starving for digital interaction. This was the moment the industry pivoted from a scientific curiosity to a commercial juggernaut, fueled by the erratic, smoky energy of the arcade rather than the calculated precision of the laboratory.
The phenomenon crossed the Pacific, mutating into a global obsession that alarmed sociologists and drained national treasuries. When Taito released Space Invaders in Japan, the game was so addictively pervasive that it allegedly caused a nationwide shortage of 100 yen coins, forcing the Imperial Mint to triple production. The arcade became a neon-lit sanctuary, a cavern of electronic chirps, where teenagers congregated around cabinets housing Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. It was a cultural fever dream, generating revenue that rivaled the box office take of Star Wars. Yet this rapid expansion was built on a foundation of unbridled greed. By the early 80s, the sector was awash in venture capital and devoid of quality control. Warner Communications, having purchased Atari, pushed for infinite growth, flooding the market with substandard cartridges that barely functioned. The philosophy shifted from innovation to exploitation, culminating in the rush to produce a game adaptation of Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial in just 5 weeks. The resulting product was a disjointed, unplayable mess that shattered consumer confidence, proving that even a burgeoning empire could collapse under the weight of its own hubris.
The ensuing crash of 1983 was not merely a market correction, it was an extinction event. Retailers, burned by unsold inventory, refused to stock video games, declaring the medium a passing fad, akin to the hula hoop. In a final act of corporate shame, Atari loaded nearly 1 million unsold cartridges of E.T. and Pac-Man onto a convoy of trucks and drove them to a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico. There, beneath a layer of concrete, they buried the evidence of their failure, leaving the American video game industry for dead in the desert dust.
It is fascinating to consider how close we came to losing this medium entirely. Before we examine the resurrection, I have a question for you. If the industry had not recovered in the 80s and gaming remained a niche hobby for computer enthusiasts, what modern technology do you think would never have been invented? GPUs? The internet? Leave your theories in the comments below.
A vacuum, however, abhors emptiness. While American retailers turned their backs, a century-old playing card company in Kyoto saw an opening. Nintendo, led by the iron-fisted Hiroshi Yamauchi, approached the shattered U.S. market with a strategy of masterful deception. They knew the term video game was poison to American buyers, so they redesigned their Famicom console to look like a VCR and bundled it with a plastic robot named ROB. They marketed the Nintendo Entertainment System not as a game console, but as a high-tech toy, a Trojan horse designed to sneak back into the living room. This resurrection came with strict authoritarian control. To prevent another crash, Nintendo implemented a draconian licensing system, forcing developers to adhere to rigorous standards to earn the official Nintendo seal of quality. This lock-and-key approach stabilized the volatile market, shifting the power dynamic from the chaotic arcades back to the controlled environment of the home. With the release of Super Mario Bros., the medium was not only saved but codified, establishing a new grammar of play that would define the digital realm for generations to come. From that gray plastic chassis, the medium ascended the steep curve of Moore's Law with frightening speed. The abstract blocks of the 8-bit era dissolved into the crude polygons of the PlayStation, eventually maturing into the breathtaking photorealism of the Unreal Engine. Today, the industry that was once left for dead in the desert dust now eclipses the combined economic power of Hollywood and the music industry. It has moved from the fringe of the carnival midway to the center of modern life, where professional athletes fill Olympic-sized stadiums not to throw javelins, but to compete in League of Legends for multi-million-dollar prize pools. Yet, for all the graphical fidelity and processing power, the core promise remains identical to Ralph Baer's original brown box. Unlike a film that asks for your attention or a novel that asks for your imagination, a game demands your agency. It is a unique collaborative act where the creator builds the stage, but the player writes the script. We do not simply observe the tragedy in The Last of Us or the triumph in Elden Ring. We are complicit in it. This interactivity creates a profound psychological anchor, blurring the line between the observer and the participant in a way no other art form can replicate.
Ultimately, this journey from the oscilloscope to the cloud reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. We are compelled to play. We build these complex simulations not to escape reality, but to practice it, to test our reflexes, our logic, and our morality in a space where the consequences are reversible. The blip of the electronic ball was never just a novelty, it was the heartbeat of a new digital consciousness, one that has grown to encompass the entire globe, connecting millions of minds in a shared synthetic dream.
As we look toward a future of haptic suits and neural interfaces, it is worth remembering that it all began with a jammed coin mechanism and a buried landfill. I leave you with this final thought. Do you believe we are currently living through the golden age of gaming, or has the industry's shift toward monetization killed the wild, creative spirit of the arcade era? Share your thoughts below. I am Alistair, and I will see you in the next video.